She was mocked, humiliated, and treated like dirt by everyone in town, until one mysterious stranger sat at her table and saw what no one else dared to see. From that moment on, nothing would ever be the same. What he discovered, no one was ready for it. In the heart of Tennessee lies a town too small for the maps and too quaint for the hurried pace of modern life. This is where our story unfolds, amidst the rustic charm of old diners and roads that wind endlessly into the horizon. Here, in a little-known diner by the roadside, works Callie Monroe, a young woman with dreams larger than the town itself. Callie starts her mornings before dawn, her alarm clock a faithful companion in the otherwise silent hours. As the first light of day spills over the small town, she's already bustling around the diner, setting up tables, her movements as fluid as the coffee she pours. Her customers are few, mostly truck drivers passing through and locals who've known her since she was a child. The clink of coffee cups and murmured greetings are the melodies to which she orchestrates her day. Despite the smiles she offers, there's a solitude about Callie that the locals whisper about, but never to her face. They see her simple clothes, her hair always pulled back in a hurried ponytail, and they draw their conclusions without ever looking deeper. Callie's grandmother, who raised her after her parents' untimely departure from this world, now depends on her for care. The weight of medical bills and daily needs keep Callie tethered to the diner, her dreams of returning to school fading with each passing year. It's a quiet life, punctuated by moments of silent despair and secret hope scribbled on napkins during her breaks. Today, like every other day, she faces the disdain of certain high-minded locals. They come for her service, but look down upon her, their words dripping with a disdain she's learned to ignore. Just a waitress, they say, as though the title is a sentence to mediocrity. But Callie is more than what they see. Hidden beneath the routine of orders and polite nods is a mind alive with creativity. During rare moments of quiet, she sketches, landscapes, faces, dreams. These sketches are her silent rebellion against the confines of her life. However, tucked away under the counter, these pieces of her soul rarely see the light of day. Enter Liam Montgomery, a stranger with tired eyes and a presence that doesn't fit in the faded fabric of the diner. His arrival is not heralded by any fanfare. He is just another customer seeking shelter from the rain that has started to pour outside, his entrance marked by the soft chime of the bell above the door. Their first interaction is mundane. Coffee, black, no sugar. He finds a seat by the window, his gaze lost in the relentless drizzle outside. Callie, with a polite smile, places a mug in front of him, her hands briefly brushing his. There's an apology in his nod, a quiet acknowledgement of the world he stepped away from, a world as relentless as the rain against the window. As he settles into the rhythm of the diner, his attention is drawn to a particular napkin under his coffee cup. It's one of Callie's unnoticed sketches, a detailed drawing of the view from that very window, transformed by her imagination. Intrigued, he waits for her next pass. When Callie returns to refill his cup, their eyes meet, a silent question hanging between them. It's a moment, brief yet profound, a flicker of connection in the simplicity of a diner. Little does Callie know, this is just the beginning. Little does she know, her world is about to change, for in Liam's eyes there's a spark of something like recognition of her unseen value, her unspoken dreams. And as the rain continues to fall, washing away the dust of complacency, the story of Callie Monroe begins to unfold. A story of dreams, prejudice, and a chance encounter that could change everything. Little does she know, the real journey is just beginning. Callie's shift that rainy morning had slipped into a rhythm, punctuated by the soft patter of rain against the old diner's windows. It was as if the weather had conspired to slow down the world outside, giving her mind a rare chance to wander. She moved from table to table, her thoughts drifting back to the quiet man by the window. Liam watched Callie with an intensity that was uncharacteristic for a casual diner. His eyes followed her every movement, not out of infatuation, but a curiosity stirred by the glimpse of her hidden talent. Each time she approached, his gaze shifted subtly, noting the gentleness in her interactions. the quiet grace with which she carried her burdens. On one such pass, Liam's fingers brushed against another napkin sketch left carelessly beside the salt shaker. It was a detailed drawing of an old oak tree that stood solitary across the street. The lines were etched with a precision that betrayed more than just a fleeting hobby. There was passion, there was longing. Liam felt a stir within him, a resonance with his own hidden scars and secluded dreams. "Do you draw often?" Liam asked quietly, the next time Callie refilled his coffee. His voice was gentle, trying not to startle her, to not scare away the fragile connection he felt was forming. Startled, Callie fumbled slightly with the coffee pot. "Oh, just doodles really. Nothing serious." Her cheeks flushed with a mix of embarrassment and surprise. Nobody had ever taken an interest in her sketches before, let alone a stranger. "But they're beautiful," Liam insisted softly, pushing the napkin slightly towards her across the table. "You have a real talent." The compliment hung in the air, heavier than the humid Tennessee breeze. Callie shrugged, a self-protective reflex honed by years of minimizing her dreams to fit the reality of her small-town life. "Thank you, but it's just a pastime. Helps to pass the day." Liam nodded, understanding the unspoken words. He glanced out the window, watching the relentless rain. "Sometimes," he started, turning back to her with a thoughtful look, "the things we do to pass the time are the things we should be doing all the time. Don't you think?" The question lingered, a challenge to the boundaries Callie had accepted long ago. She pondered it, the notion that her art could be more than just secret scribbles on disposable paper. It was a dangerous thought, one that threatened the carefully constructed confines of her existence. As the morning waned into afternoon, the diner emptied, leaving Callie to her closing duties and a mind buzzing with unfamiliar possibilities. Liam's words echoed in her thoughts, mingling with the rain's rhythmic cadence on the roof. Could her passion for drawing be something more? Could her life be more than this? Liam left the diner that day with a polite nod and a promise to return. As he stepped out into the rain, Callie watched him through the window, a silhouette blurred by streams of water. He was a mystery, an unexpected catalyst in her monotonous world. That night, as Callie lay in bed listening to the rain's persistent song, she pulled out an old sketchbook from under her bed. Her fingers traced the outlines of drawings long forgotten, each a frozen echo of dreams she'd never dared to chase. Liam's question haunted her, a whisper in the storm. What if? And so, without fully understanding why, Callie began to draw. Under the veil of night, guided by the soft glow of a single lamp, her dreams took shape once more on the blank pages. The familiar scratch of pencil on paper felt like a rediscovery of something precious, something undeniably hers. It was a quiet defiance, a small reclaiming of the self she had almost forgotten. As the dawn approached and the first hints of blue edged the night sky, Callie made a decision. Tomorrow she would show Liam her sketches. Not because she sought approval, but because for the first time in a long time, she wanted to share a part of her that was real, vibrant, and alive. And somewhere in the depths of a sleepless night, Callie Monroe began to believe perhaps there could be more to her story after all. The next morning came quietly, the storm having passed, but the skies still heavy with the weight of gray. The town slowly stirred back to life, but something had shifted, though no one could quite name it. At the diner, Callie moved with the same practiced grace, but her mind was elsewhere. In her purse, tucked carefully between two folded bills, were a few pages from her sketchbook, pages she'd never shown anyone before. She didn't know if Liam would come back. She hoped he would. Meanwhile, just a few blocks from the diner, in a modest motel that hadn't seen fresh paint in years, Liam Montgomery sat alone in a room that smelled faintly of damp carpet and old tobacco. He stared at his phone, its screen dark. No emails, no calls. He turned off the notifications days ago, but still he checked. Habit, maybe. Or guilt. Back in New York, Liam wasn't someone people ignored. CEOs waited for his approval. Designers hung on his critiques. People fought for his time. But here in this quiet town where no one recognized his face or his name, he found something he hadn't felt in years: stillness. He looked around the room, a suitcase, barely unpacked, a laptop, untouched, and beside the bed, the napkin he'd kept from yesterday, Callie's sketch. He unfolded it again, his eyes drawn to the delicate lines, the way she captured not just an image, but a feeling, a place seen through the lens of longing. There was something about her, something in her silence that spoke louder than words. Liam didn't need to know her whole story yet. He felt it. She had been overlooked, dismissed, maybe even broken. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he felt connected to that. At the diner, Callie glanced toward the door every time the bell rang, trying not to look eager. But time passed slowly, and Liam did not appear. Her heart dipped a little lower with each passing hour. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that Liam wasn't just any tired traveler. He was a man who had once stood on the covers of magazines, a man who'd built and sold tech empires before most people knew what an app even was. But none of that mattered here, and that was the point. Here he was just Liam, a stranger, a man hiding from a world he no longer trusted, a world that had cheered him on as he lost himself piece by piece. By late afternoon, the bell above the diner door finally chimed, and Callie didn't need to look up to know it was him. She felt it in the air, in the pause of conversation, in the way her chest fluttered. He sat at the same table, by the window. And this time, when she approached, she didn't just bring coffee. She brought the sketchbook. Liam looked up, surprised, then deeply moved. She placed it on the table slowly, uncertainly. Her eyes didn't meet his. "I thought you might want to see more," she said quietly. And for a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the wind stirred the branches. Inside, something else had begun to move. Something invisible, but undeniable. The kind of shift that only comes when two people, broken in different ways, start to see one another for who they truly are. And so, the next page of their story turned. Quietly, but forever. The rain returned that evening, gentler than before. Not a storm, but a steady hush that blanketed the small town in quiet. The streets glistened under the dim glow of streetlights, and the sound of droplets tapping on rooftops brought a kind of peace, the kind that only comes when the world slows down. Callie closed the diner alone that night. Her co-worker had gone home early, and the last customer had left an hour ago. The chairs were stacked, the lights dimmed. But she stayed, not out of duty, but because of the man who sat at the corner table, quietly turning pages of her sketchbook with a kind of reverence she had never seen. Neither of them had spoken much since she handed it to him. But something passed between them in the silence, something unspoken, and yet deeply understood. Finally, Liam closed the book and looked up. "These don't belong in a drawer," he said, his voice low and steady. "They belong out there, in the world." Callie smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "That world doesn't usually open its doors to people like me. Maybe it just needs someone to knock harder," he replied. She didn't answer. Instead, she walked to the window and watched the rain. Her reflection stared back at her, tired, plain, a little lost. For a moment, she imagined what it would feel like to believe she was worthy of more. Liam stood, placing the sketchbook gently on the counter. "Let me walk you home," he offered, almost shyly. Callie hesitated, but something in his voice, something honest, made her nod. They stepped into the night together, the rain wrapping around them like a soft blanket. Liam held his jacket above both their heads, and though it didn't shield them much, neither seemed to mind. The silence between them was no longer heavy. It was warm now, comfortable. As they walked, Callie spoke softly, her voice nearly drowned by the rain. "You don't talk much about yourself." Liam glanced at her, then back at the road ahead. "There's not much worth telling." "That's hard to believe." He smiled. "Maybe one day I'll explain why I came here." And Callie, without thinking, replied, "Maybe one day I'll believe I deserve something better." They reached her front porch just as the rain softened into a drizzle. The light above the door flickered, it always did, and her grandmother's silhouette passed briefly by the living room window, unaware of the moment unfolding outside. Callie turned to Liam. "Thank you for seeing something in me." Liam looked at her, really looked at her. "Thank you for reminding me how to see." She opened the door slowly, hesitated, then stepped inside. Liam remained there for a moment longer, standing in the rain, watching the door close gently behind her. And somewhere deep inside both of them, something had shifted. They didn't know it yet, but the rain had washed away more than just dust that night. It had started to clear the weight of old wounds. The next few days unfolded like pages in a forgotten book, slow and tender. The rain gave way to sunshine, though the streets still smelled of damp earth and old stories. And at the diner, something subtle had changed. Not in the place itself, but in the way Callie carried herself. Her shoulders were still heavy, but they no longer hung with shame. There was a softness in her smile now. Not hope exactly, but something near it. Liam kept coming back. Not every day, but often enough that the regulars started to notice. He always sat at the same table by the window, always ordered the same thing. But what made people talk wasn't the routine. It was the way he looked at Callie, like he was listening, even when she wasn't speaking. She didn't talk about the sketchbook again, not right away, and he didn't press. Instead, they spoke of small things, books, music, places they'd never been. She asked about New York once, carefully, as if not wanting to sound too curious. He gave a small smile and said, "It's loud, but sometimes loneliness screams louder." That answer stayed with her. One afternoon, he surprised her. Instead of sitting alone, he waited outside the diner after her shift. He stood beside a rusted pickup truck that clearly didn't belong to him, with 2 coffees in hand and a question in his eyes. "Walk with me?" They wandered through the back roads, where wildflowers grew in patches and the air smelled of pine. Callie hadn't walked this far outside town in years, not since her grandmother started getting worse. She felt the ache of freedom in her chest. Strange, unfamiliar. They didn't talk much that day, but at one point Liam stopped, looked out over the fields and said, "You know, there's more to life than surviving." Callie's throat tightened. She wanted to respond but couldn't. She simply stood beside him, eyes on the horizon, pretending the wind was the reason her eyes stung. A friendship began to form, not loud or obvious but steady, like a river cutting through rock. Slowly, quietly, it changed everything. Liam began to bring books for her, old art books, secondhand and worn. Inside the covers, he'd leave little notes, comments on her drawings, questions, encouragements. Callie would take them home, read them under the glow of her bedside lamp, and feel seen in a way she never had before. And still, they never talked about why he was really there, or what exactly he was running from. But Callie knew what it felt like to carry silence, so she didn't ask, not yet, because something in her told her. The truth always comes when the heart is ready to hear it. It started with whispers, the kind that slip through screen doors and drift over cups of bitter coffee. At first it was harmless, curiosity wrapped in small-town gossip. "Who's the man always sitting by the window? He's not from here, is he? Looks too polished to be just passing through." But then, the questions began to sting. Some folks said Callie was getting too comfortable. Others called it foolishness. A few said worse, that maybe she was playing some kind of game, trying to catch herself a rich outsider, someone to rescue her from her dusty little life. Callie heard them. Not directly. No one ever said it to her face. But she saw the shift, in the way people looked at her, in the sudden hush when she walked into the grocery store, in the coldness from old classmates who used to at least nod politely. And Liam, he noticed too. One afternoon, while she poured coffee for a table of older women, one of them leaned just a little too far and said, not quietly enough, "Pretty girl like that, always was bound to aim high, even if she don't belong there." Callie's hand trembled as she set down the cup. Liam waited outside the diner that day. He didn't say anything when she walked out with red eyes and a silence heavier than usual. But as they walked side by side, he finally asked, "You okay?" She gave a hollow laugh. "This town loves you, until it doesn't, and they've never really loved me." He stopped walking, looked at her, truly looked at her. Then maybe it's time someone showed them what love really looks like. The words caught in her throat. They weren't just about affection. They were about worth, about standing up for someone the world had overlooked. And though nothing changed right away, something in Callie's chest stirred that night. Still, she knew, people talk, and they don't always stop, especially when something or someone makes them feel small. And Callie, she was starting to shine a little too brightly for their comfort. It had rained again that morning, just a light drizzle, soft enough to make the streets shimmer and the air smell like earth. Liam arrived at the diner with a book under his arm, but this time he didn't stay for long. Instead, he asked her if she had the afternoon free. Callie hesitated. Her grandmother had been having more forgetful days lately, more silence than words, but the nurse would be there until 6. So she nodded, curious, unsure where this day might lead. He didn't take her anywhere fancy, just a quiet spot by the lake on the edge of town. The kind of place kids used to go fishing before phones took over their summers. Liam spread out a blanket and handed her the book. Not an art book this time, but a journal. The pages were blank. "For your own drawings," he said. "Not napkins, not scraps, real pages, ones that are meant to be kept." Her fingers brushed the cover like it was something sacred. She didn't speak. She couldn't. That evening, she invited him in, just for a moment. Her house was small, old, the kind where every door creaked and every floorboard remembered footsteps from years gone by. Her grandmother was asleep in the back room, and the house smelled of chamomile and faint lavender. Liam looked around quietly, not judging, just absorbing. It felt lived in, real. Then, without warning, his eyes caught something half hidden beneath the bed in the living room. A large frame wrapped in an old towel just barely peeking out. Callie froze when she saw where he was looking. She knelt quickly, tried to slide it back under, but Liam gently placed a hand on her arm. "Is that yours?" She didn't answer right away. Her hands trembled. Finally, she nodded. "I painted it. Years ago. Back when I thought there might be room for that in my life." He asked to see it, and slowly she unwrapped it. The painting was stunning. A field of sunflowers under a stormy sky. Raw, textured, and full of movement, like emotion frozen in color. Liam didn't say anything for a long time. Then softly, "Why did you stop?" Callie looked away. Her voice, when it came, was barely above a whisper. "Because dreams don't feed sick grandmothers. And people here, they don't care what you see in a sunflower." Her eyes filled, but she blinked the tears back. She didn't want pity, but Liam didn't offer pity. He just looked at her and saw, and for the first time in years, Callie felt like her silence had been heard. The days that followed felt almost unreal. Callie, for the first time in years, started to feel like maybe her life could be more than what it had always been. She began painting again. Not every day, but when the diner was quiet or when her grandmother was resting, she'd set up a small easel in the kitchen and let the brush guide her. Liam kept showing up, not just at the diner now, but at the doorstep with groceries, with soup when her grandmother had a cold, with silence when words were too much. He never asked for anything. He just stayed. People in town noticed, and as small towns do, they talked. But the whispers grew sharper, louder. This time they weren't just curious, they were cruel. Rumors swirled that Callie was taking advantage of him, that he was probably some lonely man with deep pockets and no sense, that she had trapped him somehow. And then, the news broke. It started with a post on Facebook, a photo someone had taken of Liam getting out of a black car on the edge of town. Nothing strange about it, except someone recognized the car. Someone from a nearby city who had worked in finance. Within hours, Liam's name was out there. Not just Liam. Liam Montgomery, the man behind one of the biggest startup sales in New York history. A multimillionaire, a tech genius, a recluse, according to the papers. Callie was working the breakfast shift when the first customer showed her the article on their phone. There it was. Liam's face, his full name, and a headline that read, "Disappeared mogul found in Tennessee backwater." The words hit her like ice water. Her hands shook as she poured coffee, her cheeks burning as every eye in the diner turned toward her. Some looked smug, like they'd suspected it all along. Others stared in disbelief, and a few with something closer to disgust. By noon, she couldn't breathe. Outside, the sun was blinding. She walked home with her jacket clutched tightly around her even though it was warm. People watched her from their porches, their cars. The town that had barely noticed her for years now couldn't stop looking. And Liam, he was nowhere to be found. She tried to call, no answer. Texted, nothing. For the first time in weeks, her house felt cold. Had it all been pretend? Had he played her too? Or worse, had he meant well? And just realized she didn't belong in his world after all? The silence screamed louder than any rumor. 3 days passed. 3 long, aching days. Callie barely left the house. The curtains stayed drawn. The phone rang once, a reporter, and she let it ring until the voice on the other end gave up. Even the sound of her grandmother calling her name felt like it came from underwater. Everything around her was muffled, dimmed, and Liam was still gone. Each hour that passed felt heavier than the last, not because he had disappeared, but because he hadn't said goodbye, not even a word. She didn't cry, not at first, but by the second night, while cleaning a forgotten coffee mug he had used, she broke. The tears came fast, hot and angry. She cried for the hope she had dared to feel, for the belief that maybe, just maybe, she could be more than what the world told her she was. She told herself she should have known better. But the thing is, Liam hadn't left town. He had gone quiet, yes, but not because he was ashamed of her, or of them. He had left to confront the very life he'd run from. The business partners, the media, the corporate world that still thought they owned a piece of him. They had tracked him down like wolves, and Liam, for the first time in years, stood his ground. He told them no. No interviews, no press tours, no return to the chaos. But that wasn't enough. He wanted more than silence. He wanted truth. Not just his own, but Callie's too. And he knew. He had to be the one to speak it. So when he finally returned, it wasn't with flowers or apologies. It was with something far braver. He walked into that same diner, full of stares and muttered judgments, and placed a single canvas on the counter, the sunflower painting, framed, signed. Then he stepped back and cleared his throat. "This town talks a lot about who's worth what," he said, his voice steady but quiet. "But this is the most valuable thing I've seen in years, and not just the painting, the woman who made it." The room fell silent. No one sipped. No one moved. Liam looked at each face one by one. "I've made millions, sat in rooms with people who wear masks and trade kindness for power, and not one of them ever had the courage to be what Callie is. Honest, kind, brave." He didn't wait for applause. He just picked up the painting and left, and not one person dared follow. But Callie, she had heard. From just outside the door, her heart in her throat, her hands shaking. She didn't need a stage or an explanation. She just needed to know. He had chosen her, not out of pity, but because he finally saw, and she finally believed, she was worth choosing. The morning after Liam stood in that diner, after his voice broke through years of silence and judgment, the town felt different. Not louder, not kinder, just quieter. Like everyone had suddenly remembered the weight of their own words. Callie didn't go back to work that day. She sat by the window of her small home, the same one people used to ignore when they walked by. Now they slowed. Some lingered, some looked away, but no one spoke. On the table beside her was the canvas, the sunflower painting. Not hidden under a bed this time, but framed, placed in the sunlight where the colors could finally breathe. Her grandmother, sitting in her chair with a blanket over her knees, reached out and touched her hand. "I always knew," she whispered. "You were never small." Callie didn't answer, but her eyes shimmered with something deeper than tears. That afternoon there was a knock at the door. It wasn't loud, just a quiet tap. The kind of knock you don't expect, but somehow always knew would come. She opened it slowly. Liam stood there, soaked from the shoulders down. It had started to rain again, that soft, steady kind of rain that doesn't ask permission. He didn't speak right away, just looked at her. Not nervous, not proud, just full of something deep and steady. "I'm not leaving," he said. Not a question, not a plea, just a truth. Callie stepped back and let him in. They didn't rush into anything. There were no grand gestures, no movie endings. Just evenings spent painting side by side, meals shared in quiet comfort, laughter that came slowly but stayed longer each time. And the town. Some softened, some didn't. But that no longer mattered, because Callie had learned that real love doesn't need permission to exist. It grows quietly, like roots beneath the earth, strong, invisible, and unshakable. Liam helped her set up a little studio in the shed behind the house. Not a gallery, not a business, just a space where her hands could create without fear. Sometimes people came by to see her paintings. A few even offered to buy them. She didn't always sell. Some were too close to her soul to part with. And late at night, when the world was still and the porch light flickered, Callie would sit beside Liam with a blanket around their shoulders, her grandmother dozing inside, and think about how strange it was that the man who had everything once walked into her life and helped her see that what she had was already enough. That love, when real, doesn't rescue you. It sees you and stays. Have you ever felt invisible? Like the world decided who you were before you had a chance to speak? How many dreams have you hidden just because someone told you they weren't worth chasing? And what if, just what if, everything you are, everything you've been through is exactly what someone out there needs to see? Callie thought she was just surviving, until someone looked at her and really saw her, not for what she had, but for who she was. Now ask yourself, who are you when no one's watching? What gifts have you buried that deserve to breathe again? What would happen if you stopped waiting for permission and started choosing yourself? You don't need $1 million to matter. You don't need a perfect past to have a powerful future. You just need one thing, the courage to believe that you're worth more than they ever told you. So tell me in the comments, what part of Callie's story felt like yours? And what's the one dream you've kept in the dark that maybe it's time to let back into the light? If this story moved you, if it made you think, feel, or remember who you really are, then don't let it stop here. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another story that could change the way you see life and yourself. And before you go, click the video that's appearing on your screen right now for another true story that might just stay with you forever. We'll be right here, waiting to share it with you.